千里之行，始于足下. A journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath the feet. We now gather in the Tao to travel the journey together. Welcome to Tao Talks with Derek Lin, where we delve deeply into the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. So chapter 47, as you recall from our sectional analysis, previously we identified 3 sections. So generally speaking, when you deal with ancient Chinese poetry, a lot of times when you come across a chapter like this with 8 lines, the assumption may be that it's divided into 4 parts of 2 lines each. This was the exception. As you can see in this breakdown here, we have 2 sections of 2 lines each, and then the final section with 4 lines. And we were able to get all the way to the end. Previously, we completed our discussion. Now, the last section of 47 happens to be important. What it does is that it summarizes the characteristics of the sage. So here, you can see in line 5, it says, therefore the sage. And then the next 3 lines, 6, 7, and 8, are the 3 characteristics. Knows without going, names without seeing, achieves without striving. So last time we spent quite a bit of time looking at each one of them carefully. And I also mentioned that line 6 corresponds with line 1. It's all about knowing without going. And line 1, the way it expresses it is that without going out the door, know the world. Line 7 corresponds with line 2. Line 8 corresponds with 3 and 4. So I'll talk about that in our recap on our discussion last time. So here you are. Here's the last section. And we're identifying the last 3 lines as being really the most important part. So Lao Tzu started with the 3 attributes, which he expressed in his own way. And then he talks about his observation of the sages, of the ancient sages. It's important to keep in mind that Lao Tzu learned from sages who were ancient to him, just as he is ancient to us. So he describes them. And we break them down into 3 parts. So 6 becomes part 1, 7 becomes part 2, 8 becomes part 3, and it looks like this. So also a recap from last time, the first quality we talked about that we discussed in great depth is all about the sage knows without going. This is a quality or an attribute of the sage corresponding with the first line, without going out the door, know the world. So what is the meaning of knowing something without going? As I explained previously, it's actually metaphorical language. It divides up the internal and the external, using going out the door of the house as the metaphor. So everything that's outside the door of the house represents the material world of various real world pursuits, fame and fortune, all that good stuff. Everything that's inside the door is internal, specifically internal to your mental landscape, your spirituality, your thoughts, your reflections, and so on. So the primary thing is the Tao focuses on the internal journey. The internal journey is the internal transformation of the soul. The Tao is not putting the emphasis on the external journey in the physical world. Therefore, we say that you can know without going, that you can know the world, meaning everything, without going out the door. So this concept has a profound effect on how the ancient sages view the concept of going to places. And as you can see in our discussion points from before, to them, it's not about going to church or temple on Sundays. Rather, the Tao mindset on the right-hand side, it is actually all about visiting the temple within every day. So it isn't just on Sundays that you pay attention to religious or spiritual matters. It's actually every day. And it's not just going to a particular place where you get the source of that type of teaching. It's actually looking inward for the insights that you yourself will develop by learning about the Tao. So the implication on going places has more in it than just going to church on Sundays. It is also about visiting different places, whereas the common mindset is about tourist attractions. The Tao mindset is about getting to understand a different place, understand the people there, to really get to know how they see the world, the way they live, to open up your mind, to broaden your thoughts, to encompass more different perspectives. Extremely valuable. So not just being the tourist, but be the humble and sincere visitor. There is a difference. Lastly, affecting the concept of going places as it applies to pilgrimage. So in the Tao mindset, it's not about going to China or Tibet or India or any other place to seek the divine or to find yourself. In the Tao, it's about realizing that divinity is actually already in the heart and in the spirit, not a particular place, not a particular region or area of the world. So Tao cultivators are not opposed to visiting those regions, areas, places. However, they focus on their internal work while going there, while they are on site, when they have arrived, and also while returning. That entire thing, the whole process, is the pilgrimage, not just the destination. So that's where Tao sages would think differently from most people, and that's just one of the three. Last time, we also talked about the second characteristic, which is that the sage names without seeing. And that's what the Chinese characters here say. This is from second to last line in the chapter. It corresponds to, it matches the second line from the top of the chapter that says, without peering out the window, see the heavenly Tao. So it's the same idea expressed slightly in a slightly different way. It refers to the concept of knowing in the Tao. And the primary idea is that in the Tao, everything reflects everything else. Therefore, by understanding what is around you, you can also understand what is far away. The example that I used previously was all about knowing human nature in the people around you, and therefore knowing human nature everywhere in the world. Yet another example that we used last time was about the tree stump. There, just by looking at the number of concentric rings on the tree stump, you can figure out how old the tree is. Not only that, but also you can figure out what happened back in the days as the tree was growing. What happened in the forest? Well, Years ago, they're represented by the rings. You see a ring that's thicker, that's more growth when it was raining more. And when you have thin rings, that's less growth from dry seasons. So we can figure out what happened X number of years ago. And then scars in the rings can tell us when forest fires occurred. And this may be back even before you were born. You can figure out what happened many decades ago. So the idea is that there's a lot that you can tell about the past just by looking at this fascinating snapshot. You can figure out environmental conditions, climate. So same idea in the Tao, that you can look at something small and then figure out something that is great. That's the second characteristic. And then the third characteristic is about achieves without striving, that the sage achieves without striving. So that's what the Chinese characters say. Now this is especially important as we head into 48, because this will set up chapter 48 and make that chapter, bring that chapter into context, make everything easier to understand. This particular line at the very end of chapter 47 matches lines 3 and 4, which basically talk about the same idea in the opposite way. Lines 3 and 4 say that the further you go, the less you know. And that means the more you strive, the less you achieve. This line is talking about the opposite of that, which is to say, Lao Tzu is pointing out that like the Tao itself, the sages do not strive at all. There's no straining, there are no struggles, and yet the Tao sages are able to achieve whatever they set out to do. Not only do they deliver outstanding results, but usually they can do so with style and flair. So how can we do the same thing? Wouldn't it be great if we too can accomplish whatever we set out to do without straining, without struggles? We can do the same thing by following the same recipe that the Tao sages follow. And that's what this slide is all about. In order to achieve, we must practice Wu Wei. We're going to talk a little bit more about this concept in just a moment, but it breaks down into two parts. That if you proceed without selfish or egocentric motives, if you focus on benefits for all rather than benefits for yourself, and if you avoid the trap of ego and not do something just to draw attention to yourself, which you know many people do, probably even now. And then the other important part of it is that you should approach a situation without prejudgment on right or wrong, without passing that harsh judgment on the people. Instead, you want to bring a neutral perspective. You want to be a friend that can resolve the conflict in a contentious situation. Be the neutral party that doesn't take a side. That is how you maintain your credibility. That is how you win everyone's trust and maintain everyone's trust. So these are two of the ways to accomplish, to achieve without striving, without straining. So there's actually more to the story, but this is the recap from last time. We were able to get through to all three characteristics, this being the last one. And this means we are now ready to do the paraphrase. So I find that the paraphrase for this chapter to be especially rich. I have previously done a paraphrase, but it was rather simplistic. So in reviewing this chapter, I was so moved myself by the wisdom that I really wanted to do it justice by putting the proper focus on the concepts that it highlights. So the first part, the first section about not going out the door, yet know the world, not peering out the window, yet see the heavenly Tao, the beautiful, wonderful sky above. So how can we paraphrase that? Here's my suggestion. Tao cultivators do not need to travel all over the world to seek the Tao, because they know it is found within. They do not need to peer through a small window to see the sky, because they already have a complete view of the heavenly Tao. So that pretty much captures everything there. Then lines 3 and 4, as I mentioned, this is talking about how the further you go, the less you know, or another way to say it is that the more you strain, the more you strive, the more you struggle, the less you accomplish. So how would this be paraphrased? Here we go. Notice all the people out there who fixate on the external world in search of answers. The more frantic their search, the less they actually find. The further they travel, the faster they must go, and the less they can absorb from the experience. That's right. Remember our discussion from last time. We used the example from ancient times where the ancient sages realized an important thing, that if they were to walk from one place to another, between the two, on their way to their destination, they can have all kinds of observations. They can know different things, notice different things, see a familiar face, and maybe wave a greeting at them. The travel by walking is a way that allows for full absorption of the experience of going there. Then they realize that if you run instead of walk, you can absorb a lot less. You're much more frantic in getting from one place to another. You can get there quicker. You can go further in the same amount of time, but you definitely know less. And they can extend from there to travel by a galloping horse or horse-drawn carriage, and then they notice an even more extreme case where there's really no way, no chance of noticing much of anything at all on your way to your destination. Certainly for us in the modern world, we have even faster ways to travel. Even the typical car, the vehicle that we drive, that can be a lot faster than horses or carriage, and we definitely notice the same thing. We absorb far less. We can get to places faster, we can go further, but we don't really know everything that is in between. And perhaps the most extreme case for most of us will be travel by plane. Then everything that you pass over on your way, flying to a different city perhaps, it's all just a blur underneath, and soon it is out of sight, out of mind. So same idea, actually very profound, conveyed in just 8 characters, as you can see. Then we get to the final section. This is about the 3 characteristics of the sage once again, and so it's important for us, important for me certainly, to depict the last section with the right paraphrase. Here it is. Observing all this, the sages know the way of the Tao must be different. When you are truly walking the Tao, you focus on the internal instead of the external. So you don't need to go on a pilgrimage to reach the divine. You understand the world through the Tao, so you don't need to chase after knowledge to attain wisdom. You simplify and attain more by doing less, so everything can be effortless. Just like the way your heart requires no effort to function, there is no need to strive. You simply let everything come to you. So that captures the flavor of the Tao from 47. That is our paraphrase for chapter 47. So then the only thing left is for us to do a full circle discussion, tying the last line back to the first line, connect the end of this chapter back to its beginning to really get the essence of the Tao. Here we go. So in the last line of Tao Te Ching, chapter 47, and here it is, here's the last line. What it says, as you remember, is achieves without striving. The sage achieves without striving. This is a reference to Wu Wei. Lao Tzu touches on the concept of Wu Wei, which is all about attaining results by taking actions without attachments. So let me ask everyone this question. What exactly are attachments? What would you say qualifies as attachments to you, to your understanding of the Tao? The way that I would describe attachments, I guess I would begin by pointing to attachment to material things, fame and fortune. There's nothing wrong with the pursuit of either one, but you can definitely become too attached to them. That attachment can actually shade into obsession. There is also attachment to different things like one's own ego or personal agenda, self-serving, self-dealing personal agenda. And there's certainly attachments to the end results, like what's my score? Am I ahead of other people? Am I behind? Where am I in the rat race? People can become very attached to that, very obsessed. So now, that is sort of an overview of what Wu Wei means, action without attachments. So how do we get to Wu Wei? Well, we can gain insights into the concept of Wu Wei by referencing back to the first line. That's what we do when we have a full circle discussion. So here's the first line. And what it says is that without going out the door, know the world. So we talked about how this is metaphorical language where outside the door refers to the material world, inside the door refers to your mind. So the idea is to turn your gaze inward. Here's our link from the last line to the first line. And this is actually revealing. It reveals the secret of the Wu Wei principle, that we can be Wu Wei by shifting our focus from the external to the internal, or as I said just a second ago, to turn our gaze inward. So let me show you the characters for Wu Wei. Here's what it looks like. So this is actually exactly like the last line, although the characters are a little bit different. Let me invite everyone to compare the characters for Wu Wei. You'll see them in red in the slide. It's the state of effortless excellence through actions without attachments, without the ego, or personal agenda. Compare the red characters to the first two characters of the last line of chapter 47. So you'll notice that the second character in Wu Wei is an exact match. It's the same character. the first character is different. So Wu Wei, the first character is Wu, which means to lack or to not have. In the last line of 47, the first two characters, Bu Wei, the first character Bu means not. So Wu and Bu are synonymous in this context because they're both negation. They both mean negation. So we know that they are talking about the same thing also because the Wu Wei concept is a primary focus in the next chapter, chapter 48. So it actually makes perfect sense that the end of this chapter would lead right into a highlight and emphasis about Wu Wei. And that's what we're going to talk about in just a moment. For now, let me stay on this concept for just one more slide because I want to be very clear here on the secret of the Wu Wei principle. Like, how do we actually get there? What does it mean when we shift our focus from the external to the internal? That will complete our full circle discussion. So let me hang on to part of this slide and bring in a table, the 3 ways to shift from an external material world focus to an internal spiritually minded focus. External focus would be attachment to possessions, things that you treasure to the point of obsession, where you worry about losing them, you worry about damaging them. Now, the internal orientation, the Tao orientation, is quite different. It's about the management of desires. So you have less things to cause you anxiety, less things to worry about. And indeed, as we will see in the next chapter, it's about whittling away. It's about discarding, streamlining, simplifying what you actually possess. So the internal orientation is the opposite. The external orientation will be the acquisition of more. The internal orientation will be the discarding to end up with only what you need, only the things that bring you joy. And here's another difference between the external and the internal. When your mind is fixated on the external world, you are utterly dependent on what other people say and think. Dependency on external validation, it's a miserable place to be when you are hanging on to the good opinions of others. The internal orientation of the Tao is the opposite of that, in that you seek to understand yourself. You want to be more self-aware. You want to have that self-knowledge. Understand what you want. Understand where you are in your life. So that shifts the external to the internal. And the last thing to talk about is that the external orientation is driven on this overwhelming desire to gain more of the above 2 points. That is, desire to gain more possessions, desire to gain good opinion of other people, to the point where you become a slave to that. And then the internal orientation is that rather than to be driven by the ego to get more and more and more, Tao cultivators are motivated by wanting to do the right thing for the greater good for as many people as possible. So when you look at this, I think one thing that we can all agree on is that the secret of the Wu Wei principle is actually no secret at all. The secret is actually in plain sight. It is referenced repeatedly in different ways in different chapters, and to me, there is a delight and a joy in discovering all the different ways that we can understand it so we can better incorporate the quote-unquote secret of the Wu-Wei principle into our own lives. And now that you know what they are, the big benefit is that you now see the key factors that will directly lead to your ability to accomplishing the greatest goals in your life. Simply by following the recipe of Lao Tzu that you see here, I can guarantee you I've experienced it in my own life. I know that I can accomplish my goals, my greatest goals in life. I'm living that life. Truly, truly a joy, truly a privilege. And I want to offer the same thing to everyone so that you can do exactly the same for yourself. We're here to talk about life, destiny, and the Tao. How cool is that? So once again, we see how this full circle understanding of the Tao Te Ching, circling back from the last line to the first and then back to the last line again, this provides us with an extra degree of understanding, and this finally concludes our discussion of chapter 47. Our meeting has come to an end, but the journey continues on. Let us travel safely. Until next time, may the Tao fill you with peace and happiness.